Okay, so remember back when the whole COVID-19 thing hit? I mean, talk about feeling like you're flying blind, right? Nobody really knew what was going on, what to do.
Absolutely, just chaos.
Well, that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're going through the Lancet Commission's report on the pandemic response, and let me tell you, it's eye-opening.
Yeah, it really is. They didn't hold back. It's like the ultimate post-game analysis.
Totally. And they cover everything from, like, those early debates about where COVID even came
Oh,
from?
right, right.
Well, get this. Even after all this time, the commission says we still don't have a definitive answer. Both a zoonotic origin, jumping from animals to humans, and a potential lab leak, they're both still on the table as possibilities.
It's true.
Yeah.
And that's kind of unsettling when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because if we want to prevent the next pandemic, knowing how this one started would be, well, very
Right.
crucial.
Talk about a knowledge gap, but that's just the beginning. I mean, the report actually lays out 10 major failures of how the world responded, how we cooperated. 10. You'd think with something this big, we'd be all hands on deck, right?
You would hope so, wouldn't you?
Mhm.
But yeah, no, instead it's kind of a laundry list of what went wrong, missed warning signs, confusion about who was in charge, even just countries pointing fingers at each other.
Okay, so maybe not our finest hour as a global community, but here's where I really got tripped up. The report keeps using this word, pro-sociality, and honestly, I had to look it up.
I don't blame you. It sounds very technical, doesn't it?
It does. So for those of us who don't speak fluent science jargon, break it down.
Okay. Pro-sociality. It's not just about being nice, right?
Oh.
It's about acting in a way that benefits the whole group, even if it means you have to, make a small sacrifice yourself.
Okay, so like wearing a mask, even if it's a little annoying.
Exactly. But then take that to like a global level. Countries working together, sharing resources, that kind of thing. That's pro-sociality in action, or, well, in this case, the lack of it in action.
Because the report kind of calls out how some countries, well, let's just say they weren't exactly rushing to share their vaccines, even when they clearly had more than enough.
Yeah, not exactly a shining example of global cooperation.
Not at all. Yeah. But, on the topic of doing things differently, the report actually highlights how the Western Pacific region, they managed to keep things shockingly under control, at least for a while.
Right, for a while.
So what was their secret? Did they find a magic bullet or something?
Not magic, but they definitely had a different strategy. While a lot of countries were aiming to flatten the curve, just slow the spread down a bit, the Western Pacific went for full-on suppression. They wanted to stamp out the virus completely.
Okay, and how'd that work out for them?
Well, for a while, it was incredibly effective. If you look at Figure 4 in the report, their daily case numbers were like night and day compared to other parts of the world. But then, Omicron happened.
Ah, right, Omicron. Everyone's least favorite plot twist.
Exactly. Even with high vaccination rates, Omicron spread so fast that their suppression strategy basically became unsustainable, even the best plans.
Can fall apart when a new variant shows up.
Exactly. It really shows how unpredictable a pandemic can be and how important it is to be able to adapt on the fly.
And, it wasn't just the virus itself we were dealing with. It's like the pandemic also unleashed this whole other beast, this wave of misinformation. Suddenly, everyone had a theory, and they were all convinced they were right.
Oh, yeah. It was overwhelming, to say the least. And the commission doesn't let us off the hook here. They actually say this wasn't just random people sharing stuff. It was, well, almost strategic.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying there was like a deliberate info war happening alongside the actual pandemic?
That's exactly what they suggest. You see, you had social media algorithms, right, designed to promote the most, how shall I say, the most engaging content, which often meant the most divisive stuff.
Oh, right, because outrage equals clicks.
Exactly. So you have that, plus this existing distrust a lot of people already had in institutions, and then toss in some politicians who saw this as a chance to, shall we say, push their own agendas. It was a recipe for disaster.
Which is terrifying when you really think about it. Even if you were someone who, diligently followed all the guidelines, all this conflicting information, it made it hard to know what to believe.
It really did. And that's a key takeaway from the report. This isn't just about people, believing the right things. This erosion of trust, it has real consequences. For example, they estimate that here in the U.S. alone, hundreds of thousands of people died because they refused the vaccine based on misinformation.
Wow. That's a staggering number.
It is. And it shows just how dangerous it can be when we can't even agree on basic facts. But sadly, This problem of misinformation, it actually ties into another major issue the report highlights, the unequal impact of the pandemic.
Right, because it wasn't a level playing field out there. I mean, it felt like some groups really got hit way harder than others.
Exactly. The pandemic didn't impact everyone equally. Essential workers, for instance, they were on the front lines, facing a much higher risk of exposure. And women, they disproportionately bore the brunt of childcare and, well, economic burdens when schools and businesses shut down.
Right, right.
And then you layer on top of that the existing socioeconomic disparities that were already present, and the pandemic just magnified them.
It's like the pandemic exposed all these cracks that were already there in society.
Exactly.
But it wasn't just about the immediate hardships, right? The report suggests that this unequal impact, it has much longer-term consequences.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Disruptions to education, widening economic gaps, the strain on healthcare systems, all of these things have a ripple effect. The pandemic made existing inequalities worse, and those consequences will be felt for generations.
Wow. So it's like a stark reminder that a public health crisis, it doesn't exist in isolation. It impacts every part of society.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got international failures, a global info war, unequal suffering. Is there any good news in this report?
Well, there's one more major issue we need to talk about, and it's a big one. Long COVID.
Right. The pandemic after the pandemic, as they say.
Right.
It feels like we're just starting to grasp what we're dealing with here.
That's the thing. We're still in uncharted territory. We know long COVID can affect people of all ages, regardless of how sick they initially got. And the symptoms, they're all over the map. Brain fog, fatigue, it's a really wide range.
Yeah.
And it can be incredibly debilitating.
And what's scary is we don't even really know how many people are affected or what the long-term consequences will be.
Exactly. And the Lancet Commission is really hammering this point home. They say, we need to be putting a ton of resources into research now to figure out what's going on and hopefully how to treat it.
Makes sense. Because this isn't just about individual suffering. The report talks about the potential burden on our healthcare system, our economy, society as a whole, if we don't get a handle on this.
It's a massive concern, and one that honestly hasn't gotten the attention it deserves. This isn't just a personal health issue anymore. It's a global challenge.
So we've really dug into some pretty heavy stuff here. It'd be easy to walk away feeling, well, kind of discouraged.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
But the good news is the Lancet Commission, they don't just leave us hanging. They actually lay out some pretty concrete recommendations for what we can do better next time.
They do. And some of them are, well, let's just say they're not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
Oh, like what?
Well, for starters, they call for a major overhaul of the World Health Organization.
Okay. I mean, that's been a long time coming, right? But what does that actually look like? Just give them more money.
It's more than that.
Yeah.
They need more funding, yes, but also a real shift in power dynamics. They suggest setting up a new global health board, one with actual teeth, the authority to enforce international regulations, hold countries accountable, that sort of thing.
So no more finger pointing, no more dragging their feet when it comes to global cooperation.
Ideally, no.
Yeah.
And get this, they even propose moving the WHO headquarters to Africa.
Wow. Okay, now that's a bold move. But you know what? It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It centers global health equity in a way we haven't really seen before.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that global health, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
So a power up for the WHO. What else is on their wish list?
Another big one. Every country needs to have a solid pandemic preparedness plan, and not just, some document they put on a shelf and forget about.
Right.
These plans need to be based on evidence, they need to be updated regularly, and they need to be taken seriously.
Because as we've seen, things can change so fast. New variants, new challenges.
Exactly. Flexibility is key.
Yeah.
And finally, they stress the importance of a continued, and this is important, a transparent investigation into the origins of the virus.
Right, which is still sort of this lingering question mark. But this isn't just about satisfying our curiosity, is it? There's a bigger reason to keep digging.
Absolutely. Yeah. The Commission argues that a thorough, independent investigation, it's crucial for rebuilding trust in science and for making sure we actually learn from this.
Otherwise, it's just all speculation and conspiracy theories.
Exactly. And that undermines our ability to deal with future outbreaks effectively.
It's about accountability, transparency, and ultimately being better prepared for next time.
Exactly. And while a lot of these recommendations are aimed at, governments and global organizations, the report also makes it clear that this is on all of us. We all have a role to play.
Right? We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix things. And that's what I think is so important about this report. It doesn't just give us answers, it starts a conversation. It challenges us to learn from what happened and think about how we can do better, both individually and as a global community. So, to everyone listening, we want to hear from you. What did you learn from the COVID-19 pandemic? What do you think we need to prioritize to be more resilient in the face of future health challenges? Let's keep this conversation going.